Welcome to Bite Size Games, the podcast where we review short games and give big opinions. My name is Matt, and today I am joined by...
I'm Dennis, and if I could use the Konami code in real life, I'd probably use up all 30 extra lives just completing my backlog.
All right.
I'm Phil, and just happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you both. Enjoyed that Contra reference. And the reason why you mentioned that is because today we are going to be reviewing or talking about the game Contra Operation Galuga? I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I know that Japanese, like katakana, is garuga. So
Galuga.
Go with that.
It's not like Baby Beluga, I don't think.
I like that idea, though. Should. So we're going to talk about Contra Operation Galuga, this new remake of the very first Contra game from 1986-87. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Contra after this, but I did want to ask first, what is your guys' relationship with the Contra series? Meaning, what was like the first Contra game you played, if any? And, are you a big fan? Have you played the others? So, yeah. How about we start with Phil?
I've actually played, the original on Nintendo NES, and I used to love it. I mean, I think everyone, it was kind of like one of those, if you're an 80s kid, you had to have played it. It's in the top 10, I feel like, almost. And I also played the Super Nintendo one, had the Super Nintendo one, Super Contra, which I thought was awesome. It was like peak Contra, in my opinion. And I love that too. But I think those are the only two I played. There might have been one on the N64, and I remember it being like kind of shitty, if I recall. But for me, it was kind of like one of Konami's like beloved titles.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Dennis?
Similarly, I started with the original Contra on NES. I have played the arcade version. They had that in my local arcade as well.
Really?
Wow. But I always preferred the NES one because I think I played that first. I was pretty solidly into that series. I played all of them up to a point. I think the one that, Phil, you're talking about is Legacy of War, which is when they went 3D and it just got bad. I can't remember if that was on N64, but I know it was also on PlayStation, if not both. But... you said Super Contra. Super C was the second game on NES. Contra 3, The Alien Wars, was the Super Nintendo one, which was...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Super C was technically Contra 2, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah.
I think that's right.
Okay. There's a whole slew of Contra games or Contra spin-offs that came.
So you haven't
later.
kept up with every Contra game?
I think the last one I played Contra 4, which was on the DS.
Same developer as this game.
Yeah, and then before that, I think the last Contra I had played was Shattered Soldier for PS2, which is an awesome Contra game, and I might talk about it.
Okay, so you played quite a few then.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm much less than you two, it sounds like. I did play the first one on NES. I'd never owned it, though. Not that I can remember. I am a bit younger than both of you, though, so I think might be a reason. It does make a difference back in the, especially when we're getting to, 80s. That's, when I was quite young. So I did played at, a friend's house, and I enjoyed it. The two-player co-op was, one of the cool things you could do in Contra. But... I didn't really play anything since then. So this is my first kind of real playing of a full Contra game. And fittingly, it's the remake of the very first game. But yeah, so I wanted to jump a little bit into the history of Contra because it is such a substantial, it's a very famous, series. I know it. I've known it for, forever. I just didn't play it. But I was definitely well aware of it. So yeah, as you said, the first Contra game was an arcade game that got ported to the NES in 1987, 86. I looked up a little bit of the history why it's called Contra, and which was actually kind of funny, but I don't know if you know about this, but basically it was named after these rebels, these anti-communist rebels in Nicaragua that were called the Contra, which was short for Contra Revolucion, because they were they're trying to start a revolution against the communist government, and the U.S. was backing them. The U.S. like paid for, like, supported them. And then they became kind of famous because of this Iran Contra affair, where it came out that the Contra were like torturing people, and the U.S. was supporting them. And they were, the guerrilla warfare group. They were not like, they weren't like a proper army or anything like that, government sanctioned army or anything like that. They were guerrillas. So they were doing some nasty shit apparently, and it came out, and there were some news stories about it and how the U.S. government has been supporting this group, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when Contra became kind of infamous, I guess, in the West. And then I guess, this was like that whole news thing broke out pretty like soon before this game came out. So there's probably a big reason why they named it Contra. And I guess there's been no official, saying, yes, the Contra is named after this Contra from Nicaragua, but the song title name of like, I think the ending theme or something like that from the very first Contra game was actually called Sandinista, and that is the name of the communist government of Nicaragua. Basically, the Contra's enemy were called the Sandinista.
I love that ending theme.
That's the name of the song in the game. So that's like basically like, yes, this is absolutely.
So this game is an anti-communist message propaganda.
Yeah, basically. But I mean, it's entirely a Japanese game. It was made in Konami in the 80s. So it wasn't even connected in any way to these wars, as far as I know. But just kind of interesting fact there. Another fact: from what I found, there's 13 kind of main series Contra games now, which is a ton, like way more than I thought there was.
I mean,
and then there's
you're going
like
to consider that includes
spin-offs.
like Game Boy or something like that. I guess there was a Game Boy.
No,
one or two,
it
and
includes
then
the
there's
mobile titles,
yeah.
like the DS titles, but it does not. I'm not including by mobile I mean like mobile or handheld, I should say. It does not include the mobile spin-offs, which they also are. There's like gacha games, like slot games, pachinko type games. Konami doing their Konami thing. Stretching that shit out to make as much money as possible. Obviously, I think everyone knows that they're all, it's generally a side-scrolling shoot 'em up type game. But like I said, there have been offshoots, and Dennis, you mentioned they did branch into like full 3D as well. This game, Contra Operation Galuga, like I said, is a remake of the first one. It was released February 2024. It's also a side-scrolling platformer. Side-scrolling shoot 'em up, I should say. And it's been released on all platforms that you can possibly imagine. So anything you have, basically, you can get it for that. It was developed by this company called Way Forward, which actually, is a company from like 1990, I think, is when they started. They have a few original series of their own. I think Shantae is one of them.
Shantae,
that's like Shantae. That's like their most like their flagship title.
I think those are
Shanae.
mostly
like
DS games.
Yeah. So they do a lot of handheld games. A lot of their games are handheld games, and a lot of the games outside of the like Shantae are licensed games. Like they do Marvel games. They did Goosebumps, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Scooby Doo. They did Silent Hill for Konami as well. So they've done a lot of that type of game. And this game is actually, I think I mentioned this, their second Contra game. First one being Contra 4 back in 2007 for the DS. Something interesting I found about this game, though, is that it's directed by a guy named Tom Hewlett. I didn't know him. I don't know if you know him, but he used to work at he worked at Atlas for a long time ago as like a QA person, and then he moved to Konami, where he worked as, I think, a producer or something like that. And then he moved to Way Forward, and he also worked as a producer. And this is like one of the first games he directed. He actually directed this game. But what's interesting about Tom Hewlett is that he kind of has a controversial past. He was kind of either fairly or unfairly, there's arguments about this online that I found. He was kind of associated with the downfall of the Silent Hill series because he worked heavily he was a producer on like Shattered Memories and Book of Memories, which were not really well received and kind of seen as like the shit when Silent Hill started to go to shit. so he was heavily associated with that. He kind of became, I think this was his own choosing when those games were in development. He kind of decided to be the face of the game, just like, a lot of games have the face that appear on all the videos and stuff like that. He was kind of that person. So when the game came out and people weren't so happy with it, they immediately associated him with that. So there's been arguments that, it's not actually his fault, obviously. Like he didn't do everything on that game. But yeah, so, and I think those were also Way Forward games. But I think he was working at Konami at the time, but it was like Konami and Way Forward.
Silent Hill Shattered Memories I played on the Wii, and I remember that actually being received fairly well.
That one.
But the previous Silent Hills, like basically after Silent Hill 3, the games in between that and Shattered Memories, I think, were not so great. Shattered Memory was a kind of like remake of the original game, but
interesting.
It wasn't bad. I don't know if that was the Tom Hewlett directed one, but
he didn't direct any of them. I think he produced them or he worked on them. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. I was trying to figure it out which games he worked on. That was just the ones that I saw on his LinkedIn profile, which I found. But there was a bunch of, like, in the articles I was reading, it seemed like he was associated with all of the shit ones where it kind of went downhill, but I wasn't sure which one specifically and what his role was. I had trouble trying to figure that out, which is why I mentioned.
How does he keep getting more stuff made if he's associated with like bad performing?
Well,
titles?
I mean, that's the thing is like he thinks there was this I read this interview with him and he thinks like it's probably hurt his career. He is working at Way Forward now, not a big game developer. I mean, they make a lot of games, but they're mostly these kind of lower budget, like movie tie-ins or things like that. The kind of like, not AAA, not
low hanging fruit of games.
Yeah, B games, that kind of thing. Anyway, also interestingly, I found this out. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Way Forward created this game called Spider Sores in 2019, and this game, Contra Galuga, Operation Galuga, is almost an exact ripoff, or it's like basically a reskin of that game. It's a reskin of their game Spider Sores. It just has a different graphical style. That one's all like 2D, like cartoony.
But Spider Sores is like a run and gun shooter.
It's a run and gun shooter. It has the exact same mechanics, the exact same. It looks very, very similar. It's just the style, like I said, Operation Galuga is like a 2.5D game. Well, that's fully 2D, like cartoony.
Okay.
That seems a little suspect.
Yeah. So I have a theory that Konami have been working with Way Forward for a long time.
Right.
They've done a lot of different games.
They did Contra 4. They also did Bloodstained, which is a Castlevania Symphony of the Night clone in a way, but with a similar 3D engine to Contra Operation Galuga.
I think Konami likes Way Forward because they're cheap and they make games that they can get out really quickly and they work, but they're not great. They don't cost a lot to make and they're not great. And we all know, and this is something that, I bring this up because Phil talks about all the time, how Konami has gone to shit and all they care about is money now. And this kind of feeds indirectly into that theory, because I have a feeling that's kind of why this game was made. I do know, I saw some podcast where Tom Hewlett came on and he talked about like how Konami came to them and asked them to make a new Contra game. But I have a feeling they said, hey, you made Spider Sores, can you just reskin that and make it a Contra game and then
and charge $40?
Yeah, and charge fucking $40 for it, because it'll probably sell a lot just because of the Contra name. Anyway, that's theories, interesting theories, just throwing them out there. But it was interesting. I would suggest you both look up Spider Sores at some point and compare it.
This kind of tracks for me for what I do know of Way Forward, and I don't necessarily dislike Way Forward. And I do think Contra 4 was a solid game, but I played through all of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and I also played through with Matt Double Dragon Neon, which I believe was also Way Forward. Yeah. And there is a like a cheapness.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like kind of budget feeling to their games. I
Jankiness,
don't
for
want to
sure.
say necessarily bad games, but like there's something bargain bin feeling about them,
Yes.
and I felt that here as well. So, but we'll get into it.
Agreed.
And
So-
maybe that's their like bread and butter, but I think it doesn't come through as much on like a 2D game, maybe because those are so much cheaper to produce. The assets are much cheaper, but like Contra 4 feels solid because it's a 2D game. So
Yeah, that was a fully pixel art 2D
Right.
game, and it looks good. Like I watched videos of it, and that game does look good. I think I would have preferred that game over this game. But anyway, let's dive into our little, opinions on this game. So now that we've gone into the history a bit, let's talk about our opinions on this game. So first, tell me how long it took you to beat, and then describe your thoughts on it in one sentence. Let's hear from you, Phil.
It took me about 5 hours and 40 minutes, I think. And I think it was, it kind of scratched the nostalgia points for me, but it just didn't really deliver on what I wanted. And it just kind of left me wanting the older titles, I guess. Just really didn't do it for me.
All right. How about you, Dennis?
took me a little longer, and there's a caveat here, but I'll explain that later. So it took me about 7 hours to complete. And for me, there is a really solid Contra game here in this package, but it's held back by some like crappy design choices, especially within the story mode, that unfortunately is where I think the average person is likely to start this game. I'll get into detail about that later, but I have mixed feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, yeah, this felt like a wholly kind of unnecessary remake. Felt more like a cash grab to me, especially after reading the history behind it. And especially with the cost of being $40. And it also reminded me that sometimes having a story is worse than having no story at all.
Yes, man. Yes. Let me just say yes.
I think
Right.
we're all agreed on that.
Yeah, we'll get into the story. We'll talk about that. It's quite a funny one, I would say, or an interesting one. But first, let's talk about, what is the core of Contra, I would say. It's the gameplay, right? It's the gameplay that, that everyone loves. So let's talk about the gameplay. Phil, can you give us a little intro into the gameplay?
Okay, so let's assume you have not played Contra. It's basically like Mario with guns. You go. It's a side-scrolling platformer action game, shooter game, where you go from left to the right for the most part, and you can collect power-ups with different guns that you can switch between, and you basically jump around. There's different mechanics. You can jump and dash and double jump, and you need to avoid obstacles like spikes or pits that you will fall into, and basically battle a bunch of aliens and soldiers that are like in your way as you proceed through each mission, going left to right or from down to up. You do have some vertical areas that you go from down to up.
I think in this one there's a couple of right to left points as well.
Yeah. So they do mix up a couple things, but
Right, that's true.
yeah, it's mostly they do throw in a couple things that come maybe a little bit more than gimmicky, as far as like they're not gimmicky, but like
Riding on hover bikes.
yeah, it's just something to throw in, I guess, to make it different. And I mean, it's a pretty simple gameplay loop. That's what you do. You go through the stages and shoot
extremely
stuff,
simple.
and then get to a boss or a mini boss in the middle of the stage,
Collect
and then a boss
power-ups.
at the end. Yeah, and if you're familiar with the Contra, this time at least you have different characters. They do have different abilities, kind of, or different like passive kind of things. And I also think they've added in a kind of like supercharge attack that you can do. Like maybe they've taken away the bomb, which I think the Super Nintendo one had. You basically had a bomb that cleared the screen for you.
There was like a smart bomb that like
Yeah. So there's no bomb, but each weapon has its own unique like you discharge it basically. You get rid of the weapon and then it does like a special attack, like a shield, or maybe it does like a bunch of little like homing missiles or something like that. And so
And that,
yeah.
by the way, is directly from Spider Swords. as well as the leveling up of the guns, also directly from Spider Swords.
Leveling up with the guns also happened in another Contra game, though.
I think that was in one other Contra game at some point,
Yeah.
right? I don't know which one, but I remember reading that, I think.
It does exist in another one. It might be Contra 4, which was theirs.
Yeah, could be. That part of the gameplay was probably the thing that I enjoyed the most, was the powering up of the different weapons and seeing how they change, and also using the overload function to see what they do, kind of thing. That was the thing that I think I actually had the most fun with. My only issue was that, you just like most Contra games, this one was, you get hit a lot, essentially. You're going to get hit a lot. And every time, if you have a leveled up gun, if you get hit, it goes back to its original level. You lose that level up. So it would be often I would level up a gun, and then I would get to use it for like 30 seconds or less, and then I would get hit, and then I would lose it back to the original. I was like, well,
Yeah,
that's not that fun to do it like that. But
there's something about the whole
I wanted to use it
formula.
longer.
There's something about the whole formula of this game that's off. Like when you say Dennis spent 7 hours and I spent 5.5 hours, I don't feel like Contra's a game you're supposed to spend that much time
Well,
to beat.
I,
Which is a
I-
core
I'm
of my
gonna
issue with it.
I mean, the
disagree with-
original
there's
ones,
a
you
reason why
definitely
I
would.
took longer, but I also kind of disagree with you because, so first of all, the reason it took me 7 hours was because I chose to play so this game, which is different than most of the games in the series.
I think it's the only game
you have
that
a
has-
life bar.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a life bar in Contra Hardcore, I remember, which is the Genesis
Okay.
title, but only for the Japanese version.
Wow.
The U.S. version took away the life bar because they were like, that was during the age when Japan was not happy that American gamers were able to rent games, so they purposely made them harder for the U.S. versions so that when people rented them, they wouldn't be able to complete them.
And you
Right.
still can't rent games in Japan.
And one thing I should have mentioned before, probably in my history, is I also have the Contra Anniversary Collection on my PS4, and so I
Nice.
played through a lot of those on there, and that's where you can actually choose, do I want to play the US version and the Japanese version, so you can see the differences. And there are some significant differences such as that. But for me, Contra has always been like, you get hit, you die, because that's what I'm kind of used to. So you can play that way for this game, but I don't feel like it's designed for you to play that way. I feel like it's designed to have the life bar. Like that's the default.
I think that option was there specifically for people like you that they want to have
Right,
that
but
original
it's
feeling. But
hardcore.
the game wasn't designed around it though.
No, it's menacingly hard.
It's
and
it's way more difficult, and that's
So
Yeah.
what I did was like, all right, well, if I want to play it this way, then I got to be able to use the Konami code. How do I use the Konami code? There is a Konami code in this game, but it's not an actual code. It's like an unlock, like because there's a perk system in this game. You can buy perks with points. You can upgrade individual characters, or you can apply like general upgrades to everyone, or you can buy like remix music, which we'll get into. But I saved up enough points to buy the Konami code, which gives you 30 extra lives. But I used the die on every hit version of the game in order to complete this. But the amount of time it took me to earn the points to get that code, because I think it was like 5,000 points, and you earn points very slowly in this game.
Yeah.
I had to like look up a way to game the system to kind of speed up the process. So that added a significant amount of time to my. I probably spent like 2 to 3 hours just grinding, like.
Just so you could play on the one-hit kill
could
mode,
just-
basically.
Yes.
put those 2 to 3
basically.
hours to improving your skills, Dennis.
Or you could just play with a health bar.
But
which is
my
what
argument
we did.
against Phil saying that these games should be completed in a short amount of time is, I think like lengthwise, and especially for like a speedrunner or someone who's exceptionally skilled, you can beat these games quickly. But like, I have a handful of Contra games that I've played and never completed because they were just too hard. I
Yeah,
never
they are
finished.
hard.
I never finished Contra the Alien Wars. I never finished Contra Hardcore. I never finished Shattered Soldier. Like I played the hell out of them, probably, like more than 10 hours, and was never able to complete them because of how difficult they were.
Well,
I do.
I get what you're saying. I mean, I get
Super
what you're
C
saying.
and Super C and the original Contra are the only ones I've ever been able to beat, and I've used the 30 lives code, Konami code for that.
Yeah, I think they were always quite difficult games, like ones that
So
sort of not. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it begs the question. That's kind of the whole thing about this game is like, if this is this for, it's hard for maybe people like myself to really enjoy a game like this now. I think because it's like, they are really hard, but like I'm not able to.
Well, this has difficulty settings and easy mode.
It does. It definitely has ways to make it easier, but it still feels like there's no. It's like it would still take an investment of time. I feel like that I don't want to spend on this type of game to beat it as like the average skill level or something like that.
I mean, at 4 hours, I didn't feel like it was too long or too difficult. I think they did. I think that's one thing they did kind of well, is to let it be accessible to the modern audience, was to make it so, like, adding the health bar made a lot of sense. So I played with that.
Yeah, that
and
helped.
different people, different characters that you can choose from would have a bigger health bar, a smaller health bar, and different abilities and things like that. So you can kind of choose what you liked.
I feel like, I mean, I was going to say, they could have tweaked this easily with just like the perk. You could earn more perk points instead of having to grind out like a billion of them.
That's a big issue I have with it, is like it has those options in there, like to give you different play styles or to make it easier and more approachable for different people, but it's blocked behind this annoying perk system that is very, everything is very, it's the way that you spend perk points feels like a free to play game that you would play that like just ekes out little bits of currency out to you, but like expects you to pay real money to, if you want to unlock this, you got to pay real money. But it's not that kind of game. The store system, the perk system feels like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, it was weird. It was kind of, I agree. It was kind of strange to put all those perks behind this kind of really slow unlocking system. I think I played 4 hours and beat it. In that time, I maybe unlocked 3 perks out of.
That's what I was going to say. How many do you unlock? Like, it sucks that I played this long and I only got like 5 perks, and there's like 20 or something like that. 30.
Yeah, there's a ton.
To me, the most important perks were, well, for me specifically, was the 30 lives Konami code perk, which is a general, and then to change the music. which was also extremely expensive. It costs 5,000 points.
That's 5,000.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't even look for that one. Yeah. No, I got the one that like added 1 extra health bar to everyone, something like that, and some other one I actually forget.
I like there are some that give you abilities, but like I was very into playing this like the pure normal Contra way.
I could tell.
Like I didn't care about having extra skills or abilities.
But then when they hit you with, but you can't actually use the Contra code, I feel like that's a huge slap in the face for that kind of.
I'm glad they included it in some way, but like.
But to put it behind like a perk and like to have to grind to use it, I feel like goes way against the whole idea of even having it.
Yeah.
I feel like they should have just made the Contra code.
Like if you knew it, then you can use it. Like
right, like just like a classic, just like the old games.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that would have been a much better way for them to implement the Contra code, but whatever. So that sucks. And in terms of the difficulty, I actually, I was like I said, I was playing on the regular mode where you have a health bar, and I did not have much trouble with the game. Like most of it was pretty smooth. Of course, there was a few parts where I died, but I felt the second, I don't know if you guys had this, but the second to last level, I fucking hated that level just because there's one point where like you have to like go up, you have to go upwards, and this like ooze comes up from the ground.
Oh yeah.
Like gradually, and you can't like, if you get stuck in that ooze at any point, like you're kind of fucked because you get stuck. Like things are still shooting at you, and you couldn't, like I couldn't grab onto ledges or things like that. I don't know. It was just a big pain in the ass. It just felt like a mess. That level felt like a mess. Like it didn't work the way it was supposed to, type of thing. But I don't know if you guys.
So
had that.
I think
that pissed me off.
I think my particular playthrough is probably very different than yours because you had the health bar. So like, because anytime the ooze touched me or anything like happened or I got hit, I would die. I would lose my power ups. So that was extremely frustrating for me. I remember relying very heavily on the invincibility frames that you have after dying, like using that time to like get through difficult parts.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
And another thing is the way that I used power ups was probably different than you, because you would have a lifeline, so a life bar, so you would be able to hold on to your power ups longer and then like plan to upgrade them. Whereas for me, I would be more inclined to use up the special super mode where you charge them up and release. I would be inclined more to do that a lot because I knew I was going to die so quickly and lose it. So I was constantly using those upgraded.
I think that's how you're supposed to play the game, though. I realized at the end, I didn't start doing that till the end, but I think that's how you're supposed to play the game, because the weapons come so often, and then you want to hold on to something. But I think you're supposed to just, like, as soon as you see a weapon come, use your super, like constantly use your super, basically.
Yeah, I did never. Actually, that's a good point. I should have done that more.
But
often.
basically,
the perks,
anytime
the
I
low
got
point perks for like using your level to gain life back, and then using your weapon. I mean, using your special to gain life back. I think that's like a core thing to maybe trying to stay alive if you had done that. There's like a pretty low cost perk for that.
I know like certain power up weapons, like for example, the machine gun gives you an invincibility barrier when you use the special version of it. I didn't care that much about the machine gun as a weapon, so basically whenever that came, I would use it if there was enemies around me, like to give me a little bit of invincibility time. The slow motion, the laser gives you like a slow motion time frame where you can just like go through and kill everyone and they're all moving in slow motion. I would use that as well. Like certain ones I would be like, yep, using this right away.
Yeah, that's cool though. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's a good addition. I don't think that's been in other versions of Contra.
Yeah. Spider Swords, but not Contra.
Right.
Yeah, other versions of Spider Swords.
I think that, like I said, I think that was probably my favorite part as well. I agree that I didn't play that way, just with the constantly overloading the weapon, because I wanted to save it.
You did. It's there was obviously like two MVP weapons, I think, in the game that are probably, we can all probably agree are like the MVP. So
Spread fire,
spread and the Heat Seeker, man. Just
Yeah, it depends though. The Heat Seeker was a little bit situational. There were some parts where it didn't work all that well because
there's too many guys.
And they would put like random, like some parts had those big like not barrels, like rocks that would fall down, and it would target those instead of the enemies and things like that. So there was a bit situational on that one, but yeah,
it's also a very weak weapon. The homing gun.
It's not very strong. I guess the laser a bit.
Spread, I feel like, is kind of famous for the Contra series. It's like the most popular
the sound
and
that like
most useful weapon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, there was actually one other thing I wanted to mention for the gameplay, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I got a bit annoyed with what seemed to be a very arbitrary or hidden checkpoint system throughout a level, where it would like sometimes it would restart me way further back, sometimes it would start me like less further back. I had no idea like when I was getting to these checkpoints.
Yeah, they should probably let you know it was a checkpoint.
Right. It was
very
strange.
For me, I didn't
really weird.
I always felt like each level was divided into two halves.
I didn't feel that way all the
I think
way.
there might be more. I think there's like 3 or 4 or something.
I always felt like after a mini boss.
Yeah, definitely after
that
a
would
mini
be
boss.
a checkpoint.
But then I think there's like a halfway between those.
There's some other ones
too.
Yeah. I actually think, well, I don't know. In my experience, it seemed like if you died enough times at one spot, it would.
You just like be further up.
You would start. Yeah, you would be further up.
It did seem like that to me.
And
too.
it was just so like I don't know. It wasn't explained or indicated in any way, so it was a bit jarring and weird. So yeah, that was kind of annoying. Let's move on to the story, which was a wonderful part of this game. How about you tell us about the story a little bit, Dennis, if you can manage.
Well, I can give you the general gist. So yes, this is a remake or reimagining of the original Contra game, but it expands quite a bit, mostly in bad ways. As you can imagine, the original Contra doesn't have very much to the story. It's like we like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, and we also like aliens. If you don't know,
guns.
The two main characters, for example, Bill Reiser and Lance Bean, also known as Mad Dog and Scorpion. Bill Reiser name comes from Bill Paxton and Paul Reiser, who are characters in the movie Aliens, or actors in the movie Aliens. And Lance Bean comes from Lance Henriksen and Michael Bean, who are also actors in the movie Aliens.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and if you look at the original like artwork and for the original Contra game, it's like, oh yeah, they're just ripping off Aliens.
Yeah.
like
like Solid Snake.
Yeah,
coming exactly from
Snake
Escape from
yeah.
They were called Mad Dog and Scorpion in the arcade game and I think the original NES game, but I think they started to move away from that and just start calling them by their actual human names rather than their like code names.
Right.
But yeah, so you play as either Lance or Bill. They're the original guys. There's a couple of extra characters that you can play as. The Probotectors are the European versions of Lance and Bill, because at the time in Europe they were not allowed to have such violent games. So two guys running around shooting machine guns was deemed too violent. So they switched up the main characters as two robots, destroying other like robot characters to like clean it up a little. So the game was called Probotector in Europe instead of Contra at the time.
Probotector.
So
That's very nerdy.
So they drew in that lore from the original European versions as well. Contra 4 did that as well. But they don't really matter, the Probotectors. They're just they're just happy to be invited. So basically you're in some year, 26XX AD, and you are, from the title, Operation Galuga, you are going to some kind of island in South America called Galuga, and you're basically sent there to stop a terrorist organization called the Red Falcon, and they have some kind of established terrorism around the globe. But after a meteor shower, they decide to target this island for some reason. So you're sent to find out what they're up to and why they're on this island. And what ensues is mostly a bunch of nonsense, but
that's how I would describe it.
And you know, in the original game, it was basically the original version of Contra. It was, we got to go stop the Red Falcon terrorists on this island.
Right.
Okay, cool. And then like what you discover is that, oh shit, Red Falcon is actually being controlled by aliens. And that's like the pseudo reveal that you could imagine for an NES game where there's very little story. But they expand on this a lot, and they also try to cram in lore and characters from various parts of this franchise. I guess they're doing it as like, so almost like Easter eggs, but it's beyond Easter eggs. They're just like, let's just bring everybody in and let's add all this stuff, and as like a, I don't know. I guess it's like meant to be as like an homage, but it's not very well written.
No.
Yeah, I you know, I don't think anybody really gives a shit about spoilers, but it follows for this game or for this series, but it follows the general idea of like, yeah, you're going to attack Red Falcon, and then you find out there's aliens, but they add in a couple of extra bits. So for example, there's a indigenous peoples living on this island, and you meet a new character named Ariana, who's new to the series. She's one of the native people to the island. They bring in a character, Lucia, who is working on the same team as you, but somewhat mysterious. Well, Lucia goes back. She's a character from Contra Shattered Soldier, which takes place in the future.
Is definitely got to be a woman.
Ariana is, yeah, she's a DEI hire. And then there's another guy, Stanley. He's new to this series. He's wearing like some robotic armor.
Right.
But basically, you're making your way through the island in order to stop this terrorist threat, which becomes an alien threat. There's one of the most egregious things this game does is they pull the midichlorian thing with fucking
Oh right, you're a Contra,
Star
you're
Wars. They turned
yeah.
Contra into
Yeah.
a thing
Oh,
that
God.
Right.
That was like so
oh.
bad.
terrible.
like you're the chosen one. You're Contras. Contra is a gene. There's a
The original
Contra gene
Contra
on it.
was Achilles from some shit like that.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
basically
it's
try to
so
tie it
dumb.
into like ancient like lore mythology of people who were Contras before you, and apparently this Ariana girl is also that, and it's
Right.
really
And they add
eye-rolling.
like not just one alien. Now there's like 3 different or like 2 different alien races, and they're warring. And then there's this MacGuffin that you're trying to protect, and one of the aliens is trying to grab it. 'cause
There's
it's gonna-
basically a tesseract in the game
right
that you're
it
trying
protects
to
the Earth from getting attacked by the evil aliens that this other alien's working for, and you know, it's such garbage.
I don't know who wrote this. It kind of feels like a 13-year-old wrote it. But
Yeah,
It's
at
it's
most, like,
weird
at most.
because it makes me think like this. Yeah, like you said, this is one of those times where I feel like the story actually takes away, and then it's like, why have the story if if you're gonna do a story, it's got to be like no one plays this game for the story. I feel like you don't play a Contra
right.
story.
No one's playing this for the story, so why are you
Yeah.
putting so much bullshit story into this? Like,
So-
make it simple if you're gonna do a story.
I have some mixed feelings here because there have been cool story elements in Contra in the past, and like it doesn't have to be complicated. Or this feels like convoluted in a very poorly written way. That's totally unnecessary. Like, just give me like muscly dudes going on an island, hot babes,
Save the
shooting
babes.
aliens,
One
and like
main bad guy who's
I
always
almost feel
laughing
like
and escaping or something.
if you remember Double Dragon Neon, they leaned into the corniness of the
Yeah, yeah,
situation
yeah.
and made it kind of a comical game. I do
Right.
feel like they went a little too silly with that game, but I kind of feel like that
It's
fits,
better than this, though.
That fits Contra, but I wonder if Konami didn't want them to like sully the franchise by making
Right.
it like a joke. Because
But
I
I
feel
mean,
like
this
it takes
this
itself
was
too
worse.
seriously
Oh yeah,
for how bad the story is. And I just want to bring it up again because I like this game, and it's a 2.5D Contra game. Shattered Soldier on the PS2 had a really cool like premise, which was Bill Reiser got blamed for some huge amount of like deaths that happened in Contra 3, the Alien Wars, and he got sentenced to like cryogenic prison for 10,000 years.
wow.
But they
So
wake
like
him.
Han Solo.
Yeah, they wake him up in 5 years, and they're like, "You're the only man for the job."
Some alien
Like,
shit.
even though you're a criminal, we got to use you because you're the only one who knows how to take down these alien scum. But you're gonna work with this woman who's a cyborg because she's the only person that can keep up with you because she's
Sort of like
not fully
Austin
human.
Powers.
But that partner is Lucia, who's in this game.
Oh, okay.
She's a cyborg.
So they retcon it. If you remember, in the ending of this game, something happens to Lucia and she disappears, and they're like, "I'm sure she's alive somewhere." So I think what they're
Right.
insinuating
Oh,
is
shit,
that she
something
gets like
time traveled or something.
teleported, or she
dimension.
gets fucked up and turns into a cyborg, and she's in the future game, so she's gonna see Bill again. But they also do
Excellent,
things
right.
like where like Lance turns out to be the antagonist of Shattered Soldier, that he starts working with Red Falcon and the aliens, and it's like corny soap opera stuff, but it's a fun ride.
Right.
Everything
Like,
that
not
happens
convoluted,
here
messy.
is really just boring as hell.
Yeah. Really
Um,
boring.
And
Adds
the way
nothing to the
way
game.
that the story unfolds in this game is, I mean, obviously it's a budget constraint. There's no cutscenes really in this game. But I would have
quote unquote cutscenes.
There's a couple of like weird, like comic looking, like still image
Yeah.
things that happen.
I'll talk
and
about
then,
that a little bit. Yeah.
But most of it is relayed to you via like text boxes and still images of your characters. And, some games do that. Visual novels do that. I don't think it works here. I think it interrupts the action and the story. It hurts this game so much.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is when one of my notes when I played this was that I wish I had played the arcade version. Like, why? Like, what is the point of the story mode? Why? Who would prefer this over just the arcade version? Arcade mode, which is the same levels, same characters, and all that, but you just don't have any of the story shit in it, as far as I can tell. And I think that would have just been a much more enjoyable experience. I should note that there is also another mode called challenge mode or something like that, and that was also pretty cool. That was actually more fun. I thought I really enjoyed. I played a couple of them, and I thought those were really cool. The challenge modes, I enjoyed those.
When I said at the beginning that there's a really solid Contra game here, it's the arcade mode, and with some exceptions. If you configure the arcade mode with the right perks, change the music, you've got a perfectly fun Contra game that's like, hey, I want to play some Contra. I'm gonna go jump into this arcade game, play through these levels, and I have a Contra experience, and it's good. There's no slowing down.
You basically turn it into the original
story.
game. It's like NES graphics,
exactly.
30 lives code.
I mean,
original music.
The graphics.
That's why I felt this. That's why I felt it was kind of an unnecessary cash grab. Like, why? Like, I just feel like playing the original game or playing Contra 4 or one of the other ones would satisfy any itch I had to play a Contra game and enjoy one. I feel like this doesn't do anything really new that that couldn't have been done with that already exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why don't we just jump into the vibe, which I want to talk about a little bit. So it is. We mentioned 2.5D graphics. But it really lacks the kind of quality, and I think this is quite common with WayForward, unfortunately. But it just kind of lacks the polish and the quality and the attention to detail that you kind of would expect from a 2.5D game these days. Like, we played Metroid Dread. That game looks infinitely better than this game, I think, and that game came out quite a while ago. So I just didn't see. I would rather have played, a game that looked like Contra 4, like I said, or Metal Slug or something in that style. I feel like those games, that works a lot better. That would have worked a lot better than this kind of like, kind
of like poorly done 3D like graphic thing.
Yeah, it looks like a game from 10 years ago or more. To be honest, it's not impressive.
Contra Shattered Soldier. I'm bringing it up again. A game from 2002 that is 2.5D looks better than this game. Not like, obviously this game, like, resolution is better and it's cleaner and smoother, but that game has an art design that works and looks cooler and is just awesome.
Yeah,
it has an identity. This game lacks an identity. It just looks generic.
It definitely lacks identity.
It looks like a mobile game to me. Like, it kind of just looks.
Yeah, it does look like a mobile game. It looks like a game you could play on your iPhone.
I've looked at some of the mobile versions of Contra, and they do kind of have a similar aesthetic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like you said, there's not really cutscenes, but when there's story beats happen in the middle of levels, and basically everyone stops, and then you get these like cartoon versions of yourself, 2D cartoon versions popping up with a text box in the middle, kind of like a dating sim, as you said. And there's voice acting, which is appallingly bad. It's just, there's nothing of redemption, I think, of the voice acting. It's generally very corny.
Yeah.
And the writing doesn't help, obviously. The terrible, terrible writing does not help the voice actors. So I can't put it all on them, but the voice acting itself is not very good. We talk about Killer Frequency having bad voice acting. I think this is worse. Like, just the quality is just worse. Voice acting for Killer Frequency is more about the character, like the direction, I think. But this is just I mentioned the writing. The music is the other thing. So the music, original Contra music, I think is pretty iconic. The music
I love
in this
the
game
original
is,
Contra music. Yeah.
Right, and the music in this game is absolutely not iconic. It's completely forgettable. I don't think I could recognize a song if you played.
Well, I will say that the actual music, the basic music in the story mode, the bass music it uses like motifs from the original Contra game soundtrack, but you barely notice them. Every now and then you'll hear like a little bit like, oh, that's a part from that song from the original game. But for the most part, it's like really like generic cinematic, like orchestral stuff that doesn't fit with the vibe of the game at all.
No, I agree completely. Like it doesn't stand out in any way. Like it's just there kind of thing, and it's just not memorable. I think and you can do this. You can switch to the old soundtrack if you unlock it with a perk, I guess. The other thing you can do, I have, because I was playing on PC, and I have the Castlevania anniversary collection, and if you have that, it automatically unlocks, I think, some of those tracks from Castlevania. Like I remember it was playing some Castlevania tracks sometimes, like during the challenge mode, you could select the different. And I tried that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's kind of cool. But the soundtrack they made for this game is really bad.
So I went back and played like maybe half of the arcade mode with the 8-bit remix version. So the 8-bit remix is, I think, what should have been the soundtrack for this game, and it's remixes of the original NES version of the soundtrack, and they're like modern, new sounding, but they're good, and they have like the energy, like action movie energy of like, yeah, I'm gonna shoot these dudes, let's go. Like totally different vibe, and it probably, like, if I were to do it on a point system, it would raise the score of this game a whole point just based on that alone.
Yeah, they
yet it's locked behind a stupid perk system, and it's
so someone made that decision.
It's not allowed in the story mode. It's not allowed.
Stretch this game out.
It's only allowed in the arcade mode.
That's so bizarre, because like, I don't know, why would they not just use that for the soundtrack? Because what they used was just not uninspired.
Well, but I mean that's the thing. Maybe they know it's better and they want you to unlock it, perhaps. Like spend more time playing the game.
Well, I think that's a stupid move.
A terrible move, to be honest, because like that, I don't know. It was disappointing all around with the vibe in this game. I wanted to ask one thing before we break it, give our final thoughts, but I wanted to ask, what is your guys' favorite or least favorite, like your best or your worst moment from this game? And let's start with you, Dennis. Did you have one?
I would say I'm not going to pick a particular moment, but just in general, every now and then there were these moments where there were kind of like reconfigurations of bosses or even like actual level design that was sort of like remixed into the levels into this game that I recognized from previous Contra games. And I appreciated that. It was like, sometimes it would be a boss. It's like, I remember this boss, but they like switch up his attack in a way that kind of, changes up your expectations. That's cool. I'm glad they did that. And that kind of stuff is neat. Or sometimes even like actual level design lifted one for one from the original Contra or from Super Contra, but like placed into a different level. So for example, there was some levels where like there's those like spikes moving down that you have to like move through these spikes that come down on your guy, and you have to like time it. There was a level in the original Contra called the Hangar that was full of that. The Hangar does not exist in this game, but a different level, I think it might be the temple or something else that replaces it. But they took a few sections from that original level and put them in here. And I think only Contra, there's a lot of things like that. Like Contra fans will pick up on that and probably salivate over it.
Right.
And I think that's cool. Like a lot of things that cater to that. There's even a weird thing they do in one level. I don't know if you liked it or not, but there was a level in like caverns where there's these crystals that reflect your character.
It was
very hard.
It was interesting.
It's interesting, but that's taken from Castlevania Bloodlines, which is the Genesis Castlevania game, where there's a level near the end that does that same thing. So
what you're saying is this game has zero original ideas.
Right. Essentially, it's reusing things they've done
I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think with this
I'm not really shitting on it that much.
Well, you know what? Like I would think of this like what they're trying to do is kind of like what Star Wars Force Awakens was trying to do. You know, like let's this franchise has been gone for a while. It's been like 10 years since the last like real Contra game, and so let's revisit the original game and like
Right.
try to reinvigorate it and bring back like lots of member berries so people can oh yeah, I remember that. But I don't think it was executed well. I think mostly for the aesthetic reasons, but I do sense that there's a lot of passion there that they that they had. Like there's fans
those
of Contra.
Moments. You could see it in those moments,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were fans of Contra.
And
I'm
so
sure they did their research.
so for me, those were the moments that I liked.
Okay. How about you, Phil? Did you have a best or worst moment?
I mean, I guess best moment was when it was towards the end where like I said, I'd realized I should have been playing
When you finished the game?
the last
Didn't have to
second
play
to
it
last
anymore?
stage when I had started using the power-ups constantly, and it made the game a lot more fun. Like I held on to my weapon. I tried to hold on to my weapon almost until like, you know what I'm saying, until I died every time. And then once I started realizing, hey, just constantly use those power-ups, it made it a lot more fun. And I realized, it probably
Nice.
would have been a lot easier to play like this whole time. So
Okay.
that was a good like kind of revelation moment.
I get
But
that.
worst part was, I don't know, I thought there was like a difficulty spike for me. I thought it was hard. Like after like the first 2 or 3 stages, like the next stage was like 4 times harder. I felt like I was like, damn, like there's stuff in the foreground hitting you. There's like, the 3D. There's things everywhere. Basically, it's not just 2D attacks. Basically,
It's like bullet hell.
Yeah, it was a bit of bullet hell for a moment. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a shock for me.
Okay.
How about you, Matt?
All right. I just wrote one worst, well, not one, but I have a worst moment. And it's basically like there was this, I think, actually kind of close to the end of the game, they give you this massive exposition dump with this stupid like ghost character named Beowulf, who I don't know
Oh,
if that's
God.
from one of the other games or not, but
Nope. Not that I
just
know
like he just like goes on and on and on, and that's when you hear about the stuff we talked about. But I wrote down like the actual lines, so this is just to give you like an idea of the quality of the writing, because I actually wrote down
You got to deliver it.
I'll try. I wrote 2. First one is, Contra is a quality bestowed by the Lemris on behalf of the soul. And soul is spelled S-O-L, not S-O-U-L. It's like the name of an alien race that we haven't seen. So yeah.
And the
Contra
Lemris is
a
the
quality-
Tesseract, basically.
Yeah, right. And the Lemris, it's such as Contra is a quality bestowed by the Lemris on behalf of the soul. That's one quote. And the other one is, the Zygarde's cunning threatened to overcome the soul, so they placed their legacy inside the Lemris and concealed it on Earth. And like that's gives you an idea of how boring and uninteresting.
This is why AI is going to take over, man. AI could do better than that.
AI could have easily have written this. So yeah, it's just this kind of like, here's a bunch of words that we just made up and threw them all together and threw some connecting words in between them
Ponder on its meaning.
to kind of like make some semblance of a story. But yeah, just complete utter nonsense.
Contra came out when like 80s action movies were
Right.
where like you just had a muscly dude go in and just shoot up the place, and that's all you need. Like that
Remember
doesn't
Broforce? That's like, but
Right,
Broforce
yeah.
was like the modern version of that.
you don't need to complicate it with all this stuff. Like
To wrap it up, did you think this was a bite-sized game, and would you recommend it? I'm going to start with Phil.
It's short. It's a bite-sized game. It is a bite-sized game. Do I recommend it? No, I don't think I recommend it. I think, and I'm really torn on it because it's like all the kind of like parts are kind of there, but it just doesn't come together for me to deliver and perform the way I want that to perform for me. And so if you're someone who like loves these original games and you're just really a big fan and you want to play it, then perhaps get it on sale or something like that. But like as everything is right now and the way it is, I wouldn't for $40 I would not recommend it. That period. That's it.
I think I paid like 25 on sale, so
It's something, I guess. And how about you, Dennis? Would you call it a bite-sized game? And do you recommend it?
yes, this is a bite-sized game. It's short, and it's the kind of game that like especially once you unlock like some stuff and get it to where you want it to be, that you like, if you feel like you want to play some Contra, you could just jump into this. But I would only recommend it to Contra fans, people who want new Contra, because otherwise, like someone who's not that invested in the franchise but is interested in Contra, I would just suggest play older Contra games. There's a lot, and there's a lot of good ones, and even if you want to play like a pseudo 3D one like this, go play Shattered Soldier for the PS2 or emulate it or something, because I think there's better quality versions of it. Yeah, unless you want to see how fucked up they make the story of the original game. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, only for Contra diehards, I think. I still had fun sometimes, though.
Yeah. Yeah, so so yes, I would say it was a bite-sized game just because it was short and wasn't like overly difficult. It was, you could play it within a few sessions, and it was, so yes, bite-sized game, but I would not recommend it for the same reasons kind of stated here. I don't think it's worth playing. I think you could probably have a lot more fun just going back and playing original Contras, or somewhat modern, the ones that came out in the 2000s, the sequels. I don't think this game was necessary. Really, I don't think it really added much. So, yes, I do not recommend it.
I'm glad that Contra came back, because there hasn't been a game in a very long time in the series. I wish it was better, but I want Contra to be relevant again.
I think we all want that. I think
an open world Contra. Open world.
I want.
Yeah.
Let me say, I want Konami games to be relevant again, because they have.
I want Konami to do better, man.
They have good franchises that they own, good IP that I want to see again. I mean, we're gonna get Metal Gear Delta.
See, why can't Elon Musk do things like that? Like, he could be a big Konami fan and put a lot of money into it, and make these things better again instead of taking over the world.
Make Konami great again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Make our old franchises great again.
That'll wrap it up for us today. Thank you for watching. This was our episode on Contra Operation Galuga. Our next episode is going to be on Keep Driving, which is a new indie game. So watch out for that soon. You can find us on all of our social medias, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, at bitesizegames_. We are also on YouTube and Twitch. YouTube is at Bitesize Game TV, and we stream at Twitch at bitesizegames_ as well. Sorry, it's confusing. And finally, we have an email, bitesizedgames.info@gmail.com. So yeah, thank you for listening, and remember, every gaming moment is a chance for greatness.